Hey everybody, Darren from the White Hatter team, and today's Thinkable Thursday, we're talking to Justin Payeur, and he is the founder and owner of Boomerang, and that is an app that you can put on your phone for family filtering and monitoring. We're going to be talking to him about his industry, what's going on, is the industry, how it's affecting, how COVID-19 is affecting their industry, plus a whole lot of other topics. Looking forward to our discussion. Today, I'm extremely happy to have a very influential guest on our show today. And here he is. It's Justin Payeur. And he is the founder of Boomerang. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? He's Canadian, eh? He's in the Lower Mainland over in Vancouver. And he has a great company. Here it is right here. And I would encourage everybody to head over and have a look at his product called Boomerang. We're going to talk more about that here in today's presentation. Pretty slick site as well. And some of the information that he's got going in there. So why don't we bring him into scene? And here he is right here. Hey, Justin, how you doing, my friend?
I am very good. Thanks for the info.
I love the COVID. Is that kind of a COVID beard going on there?
It's my COVID playoff beard.
And is the hat to hide the COVID hair?
100%. I mean, I got the chicken wings happening now, but
see,
goes back a little bit. There,
as you can see, I don't really need to worry about that too much.
You got the easiest haircut to maintain, man.
Yeah, it is, but I've noticed
everything around.
I was joking with Brandon yesterday, but now that we're doing these shows, I think I'm going to have to get some buff to kind of take the glare off of my head, like that movie actors do and stuff, right?
So matte the top a bit, right?
Exactly. Listen, why don't you share with the viewers here a little bit more about who you are, what you do, where you're located, all those who, what, where, when, why, and how thing.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, my name is Justin Payeur. I'm a co-founder of a parental control app, online safety, and also safe browsing. Started this about, I guess, 5 and a bit years ago. The idea was my kids were turning into the teenage years. And as an entrepreneur at that time, I was looking for apps that maybe I could, license or OEM into a reseller type of opportunity. Yeah. And I wanted to get into the mobile app space because I was previously doing enterprise software sales. And that was fine and dandy. Yep. Selling primarily to K-12 across North America. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, I got to get into this mobile stuff. Everybody's got a smartphone. It was a sexier thing too, right? To talk about that. So, with my network and my business co-founder at the time, with our company we started, National EdTech, we found a local entrepreneur that had built this tech stack, and primarily had built it originally because he wanted to create a timer for his son, who's on the autism spectrum, right? And wanted to limit his time automatically, not have to be the bad guy when he takes the device away. So that was the impetus originally for Boomerang, which became Boomerang, I should say, because when we met him, I guess 6+ years ago now, he actually had a different product. It was a different name, same technology, called Parental Board. And then we dated for like 6 months, right? So we got the licensing done. We got the branding done for Boomerang, parental control, and all that good stuff, the logos, the colors. And then after 6 months, we're like, hey, man, we're kind of competing. We like you. You're local. Why don't we just merge all this together, become a team of 3 dads co-founding a technology company that has the potential of doing a lot of good. And let's go from there. So it was like, perfect, let's do it. So that's, the creation actually came from my co-founder, my CTO, but the partnership, was all kind of like just a network effect of being in the Lower Mainland, of all places in Vancouver area. And that's where Boomerang is today. I mean, we've done a lot to the product since then, but originally it had the basics, right? Location tracking, app controls, but did not have all the polish it has today or the number of users. So yeah.
So it was like a daddy trifecta.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Kind of cool, right?
Three musketeers.
And are you all based in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver?
Well, we were originally. So my one of my partners is in Vancouver. I'm based in Maple Ridge, east of Vancouver. And then my other partner was based in Langley, but actually recently moved to Seattle. Got an opportunity to work at Google. Oh. So he's kind of gone back to doing that. And then we still use him for some of the part-time back-end work. Yep. But luckily, everything's fairly solid. So we're able to do that. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, why don't we get into some of the questions? You already answered the first question I was going to answer. I'm going to move to the second question, and here it is right here. And it basically says, you know what? I know that you had some challenges getting your app into the Apple Store, but just recently I saw you were having some challenges with the Google Store as well. What's going on right now? What's happening? How come there's so many issues? Because, you know, your app is such a positive thing. We promote it. What's going on?
Well, I mean, on the Apple tip, the history there is that the approach we were taking to control iOS devices, you know, iPads, iPhones, iPods, was typically designed or more designed for the enterprise or education. So we leverage a piece of technology called mobile device management or a device profile in the iOS world that allowed us to control things like hiding apps by age groups, location tracking, all that kind of stuff. The challenge became when Apple wanted to kind of hammer down around their privacy message and realized that there are some potential loopholes that you could use on an iOS device with that technology. But again, we never intended and or used it for that. And then as we dug deeper, it was a bigger issue. They were building their own app, right? Their own feature set in iOS. This is iOS 12, it came out, so almost 2 years ago now. So that was really the anti-competitive angle with Apple. It was less about privacy. I mean, the reality is there is really no privacy online anymore. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then Google, so it looks like Google, even last year, Google started playing a little bit of Apple games where they said, well, we now care about privacy online, so we're going to shut down apps that are using a calls and text or SMS permissions, access to these areas of the Android device, unless they are default handlers, which meant if you're not a phone app or if you're not a texting app, your app cannot use those permissions.
Oh.
So we're like, well, hold on a second. We're like a safety app. Thousands of parents depend on us. We're using this for good. We're not being deceitful here. It's very clear what we're marketing and promoting, and we got nowhere. So that was kind of strike one with Google last year. And luckily with Android, as you know, is you can still host an installer on a website.
Yes.
What is called sideload option. Kind of like installing a program from a website on a Windows or Mac OS machine, right? So we still have that option. We still have those features. So we're okay. But now the recent one is parents love this feature is we can log down our apps, so it's very hard to remove on an Android device. Right? Apple never allowed that. Right? You could easily remove our app. You could easily remove the device profile. What we had done is we were at least able to notify the parent when these services were removed. So we were aware, self-aware.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So at least it's something, but it's not perfect. It's still an extra step for parents. Well, it looks like Google is following Apple here. So on Android, we leverage a permission called Device Administrator. And when used in a certain way, it can make it so our app is very difficult to remove unless you enter the Boomerang group password. So they're hitting us on that. So Friday night, I'm in the middle of having a cold beer on the patio. It was a beautiful hot night. And I get a notification from my phone from the Play Store console app. Your app's been removed. I'm like, are you kidding me? So, and then I got the email, and it's pretty much for deceitful guidelines. I'm like, their guidelines are gray, just like Apple's, where it's trying to handle a broad stroke approach of, well, it could do this, could do that, but then, it's like, what's the actual word to use? Easily reversible by the user, I think is the line I'm hung up on. Define the user here, guys. We're a parental control app. It's not installed by the kids. It's installed by the parents. Parents own the phone. So the user is the parents. Easily reversible by parents. So I have made a couple contacts via LinkedIn at Google's policy manager group in San Francisco. Still crickets. Google's app review process is, frankly, not as polished as Apple's. So I'll give Apple credit here on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Google and Apple are working together on that new app that they're trying to put together to track
the COVID tracing?
The COVID tracing, right? So it's interesting. So why do you think Google's done that? Do you think they're coming up with their own proprietary, much like Apple did, or?
Well, I know that Android 11, which is the next major version of Android from Google, will have what is called Family Link today, which is Google's kind of competitive parental control that's in the Play Store today. That will pretty much be built in the OS.
Okay.
It kind of is on Android 10 if you have like a Pixel. I have a Pixel phone myself, so it's more or less built in underneath their digital well-being features. So yeah, I frankly think they're following the same thing. And then never mind the fact that Microsoft just announced they're doing the same thing to control Windows and Android and Xbox all under one roof now. So this is the big boys just realizing, hey, you know what?
There's money to be made. Let's push out the younger people.
Money to be made.
Yeah.
But there's money, but also I think there's two other things. There's the platform lock-in, which we all know Apple's very strong for that.
Yeah.
But there's also the data gathering.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that part, right? Darren, I mean, why are social media platforms free? Because you're paying with your data you share.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that you interviewed Sean over at Kinzu, right? And he wrote a really good book. It's one of the best on the market, I think, that kind of puts into plain English how these big companies are harvesting that data and using it to their advantage. But just for our viewers, you're kind of talking about Boomerang. Can you go into a little bit more about what Boomerang is and what it does?
Sure. So it's, parental controls today do a lot. So we do a lot. So we're not just like focused on one thing.
Yeah.
So at the high level, we have the typical screen time features that parents can expect. So, device level stuff like a schedule. So, bedtimes, if you forget to take the device away, the device pretty much gets bricked at bedtime with a schedule automatically. And then we also have the device allocation time. So that way you can give them 2 hours between, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I don't care if they have a 12-hour block, but if they use up that 2 hours in the first half of the day, that device is locked. Right? So,
quick question. Some of the parents ask me, well, what if they're using, is it only Wi-Fi or is it data as well? So does it shut them out of their phone data as well as Wi-Fi usage?
We don't play with a network connection today.
Okay.
So, but one cool thing why we don't, especially on Android, is we don't care about the network connection. Okay. We are a local agent.
Okay.
So we actually don't depend on those features to work. So that device could be in airplane mode. We're still going to shut it down at 7 p.m.
Perfect.
We're still going to count out time, that 2 hour counter during the day. So kids have tried all that. So on Android, it's pretty flexible that way.
Yeah.
So we can do that. Yeah. And then beyond the screen time, we get into the app controls. So one of the unique things we still have, I think, compared to a lot of the other players in this game, of course, Apple copied this word for word, which kind of humbling, but upset me a bit, is there's an encourage or always allowed apps feature, which means that you can, as a parent, choose apps that are good, such as I call it good screen time or good content matters.
Right.
So a reading app or even like a podcast app, audiobooks, what have you, educational type stuff could be exempted from any timer.
Yeah.
So I don't care if you want to spend 12 hours on Duolingo or your Kobo app, go for it. I don't care. But I'm going to limit your social media, your gaming, your communications via chatting and all that.
I mean, so just to interrupt you for a sec, that's why I don't like using the term screen time anymore. I like using screen use. Right. Yeah. And again, it comes down, it's not about how much time it's what they're doing with that time, right? If they're just consuming bubblegum for the brain, but if they're being producers and creators and chain makers, that's what creates critical thinking and brain development, right? So, but continue. Absolutely. That's what I really like about your app is that you give the parent the ability to control that, right? It's not screen time, it's screen use.
100%. And I mean, I go back to my own experience growing up as a teen. I did not have the internet like our kids have now, but I grew up as a music hobbyist, so in my mid-teens, I was starting to tinker with a computer to make music production. I spent countless weekends locked in my bedroom tinkering, but I was creating. I was doing something. So as you said, the screen use was positive.
Yes.
It gave me something out of it. It was not endless scrolling on a news feed. Anyway,
absolutely. No, you're right on target, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the app controls go beyond that. Parents can simply block apps. We can also set it up where kids can install new apps from the Play Store or even from our website, what is called side loading, and we will block it and notify the parent to approve it.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of cool feature on Android that we do that it allows parents to educate themselves on, is that app good for my child or not?
This is one of the reasons why I always recommend to parents that an Android phone is always the best phone to start with. That's the training wheels phone. They're cheaper, if you break them, they're not as expensive. Plus, the software we can put on there to allow more parent control is far greater than you can on the iOS or the Apple phone, right? But
For sure.
another question I get from parents, let's talk about your spin browser and porn, and and what that
of course,
does
safe
as well,
browsing.
because I think that's important.
Well, that's an interesting background on that. So when we had the parental control kind of, okay, we got this, it's solid, it's working good, we got location tracking as well on top of that. We're like, what's the other pillar, right? Well, the other pillar was safe browsing. I mean, every single browser app that's on any phones today, by default, out of the box, the unboxing, does not have a safe browser built in, nor does it have filters built in.
Yeah.
And that to me it's a huge loophole that parents are not aware of. And you mentioned a key word, pornography. Yeah. Something that we don't talk enough as we raise our kids in this day and age of online content. It is the most ubiquitous piece of content kids can fall upon by accident. And the worst part is the accidental viewing can turn into a potential addiction viewing where they want more of it, and it gives them kind of a bad view of what good looks like when it comes to that kind of content.
You got that.
So for us, the browser was kind of like, it made sense. So we built it on Mozilla sources, which is the same as Firefox. So the interface is fairly common. It's got all the same features and all that. But built in, without even enabling anything, it just filters 6 core categories, such as pornography, nudity, even a category we created ourselves called prone to bad content. So we throw social media platforms like Twitter and even Instagram on there because there is nudity and borderline content that kids should not be seeing.
Absolutely.
So those websites are blocked, and then of course parents can then block those apps individually with Boomerang. So it's kind of a perfect mix, right?
So for people who don't know, and again, I'm trying to think from the listener who's listening to this, thinking about your app, because I know a little bit more than most people do.
It's tough to talk general or...
That's my goal, to help guide you there, right? So my question would be, parents are going, well, okay, it's great you have the Spinner on, application on there, but can't the kids just use the Safari or the Firefox or whatever it is that they want on their phone? Like, can't they just bypass that and go to that instead?
Well, on iOS, absolutely, because iOS does not allow a change to the default browser.
What about on the Android?
On Android, we built this thing called a block browser policy. So by default, Boomerang, once installed, will block all the major competitive. I mean, I think we are listed into thousands of browsers that we block, except for Spin and Chrome. So we do filter Chrome now. So that's kind of like out of the box. You're getting kind of like the phone you should have gotten in the first place from the manufacturer. Which I think, going back to your previous question, is probably why Apple and Google are doing what they're doing. They know there's a gap on the onboarding of their phones and their OSs. So why not provide it built in, it is what it is. But
got it.
There's still some nuances we can do better than them.
So another question I get from a lot of parents and some in the privacy industry is, this is just spyware. You're encouraging parents just to spy on their kids, right? Like, is it spyware or is it something else? Like, let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Darren, as you know, that is definitely something that when I first researched this space, there was definitely more terminology around spying, monitoring, those kinds of keywords. And there is a certain percentage of demographic of parents that think, I don't care, it's my kid, it's my phone, my data plan, I'll do what I want.
Free range movement, I call it.
Free range, whatever, I'm going to spy on you, I need to know everything. And there's a bit of helicopter parenting going on in that as well. And I can't change that demographic of users. But as a brand, as my own self as a parent, what I wanted to build was use this tool as a conversation starter. Don't use it to completely just monitor and set and forget it. There's no such thing as a parental control that you set and forget. It's got to be kind of it's a process. It's like a better term, it's a contract almost with your child expectation. And I like to use this as well. You would never, unless you have one of those pedal bikes you just pedal with, you would never give your child their first bike without training wheels.
Absolutely.
So, give that first phone. As you mentioned, Android gives you the best flexibility, cheaper to start with as well, because they will break them. My daughter's broken 5 phones. 5. Okay. The last one she paid herself, and she still broke that one. Luckily, that one did not cost me anything. So they will break them. But that's the challenge is finding the balance with that.
Here's what I say to parents. You know what? Younger kids especially, they have no right to privacy. They can earn that privacy over time by showing us good digital literacy. The other thing I say to parents is software like this, when you put it on the phone, let the kid know you're putting it on the phone. Don't keep it a secret. Be open and honest with them. And then use the software for learning. for teachable moments rather than punishment. So a good example, if your software picks up that all of a sudden my son went to playboy.com, I can now sit down with him and go, hey, Brandon, did you go to playboy.com yesterday? Yeah, Dad, that was me. You know what, dude? I get it. When I was in middle school, my dad had these things called Playboy magazines. I used to, sneak them out. But Brandon, do you know what the difference is between healthy human sexuality and pornography? No, what does that mean? Yeah. Let's talk about it. So it opened up a window that we can have further discussion. It's not about using this software to punish. It's about using it for educational or learning purposes. And then what I say to parents is that once your child is showing you good digital literacy, take it off their devices because they've earned that right. But it's like those training wheels, like you said, right? And that's what I love about Boomerang, right? Is that it gives that parent that flexibility to have discussions. I love the fact that you built the spin in there for the purposes of doing what it does. It made logical sense, and I think you're right. I think the big boys have figured that out and are now going to try and do the same thing, right? I mean, that's why I say to people, use your product, and then another good fit in with your product now is Kinzu, right? For using that as the messenger in a family environment that is totally scaffolded, right? Like there's so many really cool ideas out there. But let's ask you another question here. My next question. Has your app changed your beliefs and views on social media safety and digital literacy over the past few years? Let's hear some thoughts on that one.
Well, the short answer is absolutely yes.
How?
Well, I think when I first started this, I had more of a negative reaction to things that happened. That it'd be, I'll share a bit of a story related to this, why my original, reaction was like this. My daughter, typical age now is about 10, 11 years old. Kids are getting their first smartphone. So my daughter was in that average, okay? And then within 6 months of getting her phone, we found out that she was using an app called Kik.
Very familiar with it.
I'm sure you are. Back then, and I'm not even sure if they're still around anymore.
They are. They're still around.
Are they still around?
They sold, but then they pulled back, so they're still around. In fact, a lot of kids, especially in more isolated communities, it's still very popular.
Interesting. So I guess my daughter was an early adopter because at that time it was primarily just a chatting, kind of anonymous, nickname-based chatting platform. It did not have all the apps it has now, which I think it has like a built-in browser and a bunch of other stuff like games. And anyway, because it had no real privacy controls back then, and everybody was pretty much anonymous, she assumed one of the chats she was on was one of her buddies from school. And we're talking grade 7, grade 8, grade 7.
I know where this is going.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So a typical kind of conversation. Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? What you up to? What you up to? Right? Just like that light, fluffy stuff, assuming it's somebody you know. And then say, hey, where are you at? Send me a picture. So a picture of maybe a selfie in a bedroom or at outside, whatever. And then got up and down to pretty much, she was sent a nasty photo of someone's genitals, a boy's genitals, right? So the amazing story here is the school got involved, local RCMP got involved. They hunted down that this boy was a repeat offender based in New York State, of all places. Like that blew my mind that, even in that day and age, 6, 7 years ago, the connections between borders and all that, and the first responders and the police service were able to trace it that way.
Yep.
I mean, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
But to me, that left me scars originally around social media platforms. They're bad, this and that. And it was always a negative connotation to things.
Yeah.
As I learned more and I read more books around this space and the mental health angle as well, how for some people it's a good thing. They're being creators. Some other people are looking at it as an outcome or an outlier, whatever you want to call it. Today, I'd say it's more positive in terms of, I think there's a lot of good things that are happening on these platforms. I think parents have to be involved in the conversation.
For sure.
In fact, in 2020, there should be no excuses why parents are blindsided by anything with all of the content and information that is available today from people like yourself that are doing this with schools and communities and all that. I mean, it's pure laziness to me if you can't sit down before you give your child their first phone, first mobile device, and have a bit of background on what's out there, right? That it be apps, parental controls, social media, ups and downs, whatever. I mean, games, streaming platforms. So, I'd say in terms of digital literacy is definitely more spoken about today. There's more awareness, but it's still, as you probably see, when you speak, there's still a lot to go.
Oh, you know what? One of my biggest battles is to get parents to understand that most of our kids are doing super uber cool things online. They really are, and we adults need to start acknowledging that fact. But parental abdication on this issue is huge. They would rather say, "This is not my job; it's the job of the school," right? And
Yes,
when we
I've
do
heard that.
parents presentations, like I was at a school of 2,300 teens that I presented to at a high school level. We did a parents present that night, and only 3 parents showed up. Well, no wonder they have problems, right? The research shows us that parents who are engaged with their kids online, those kids are far less likely to get involved in less than desirable behavior. But the other thing I think that happens is, and one of my fears has always been that parents think that they can take a product like yours and put it on their device and go, okay, they're good to go, right?
Yeah.
No, it is a part of a big old puzzle. It's multifactorial in nature, and a part of that is parental supervision, parental communication, and overwatch. And a part of that overwatch is your product. But it's like the band of a hand, right? They have to work together.
I used a line with a couple of customers, and one that got actually really upset with me. And again, context sometimes can help you, but I said, we're having some troubles with the app. It wasn't, say, collecting some content or something. And you get to a point where it's like, okay, well, you got to start parenting the situation. Your kid is hacking the device.
Yeah, it's what I say to parents is, be your child's best parent and not their best friend. There's a difference.
Yes, and then the line I used here, and I used to use this a lot, and I stopped using it because it upset a few parents. I said, our app will never replace good parenting. And I thought that was totally fine, but she took it as I was telling her she was a bad parent. I was like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. But I'm like, okay, I'm not using that again.
I use that all the time in my presentations. And the reason I do that is because the fact of the matter is that some people aren't being the best parent, they're being the best friend. And there's a difference between the two. There really
I agree with
is,
that.
right?
No,
next question. So I support you using it. I think because it's true, right? Sometimes we have to look in the mirror and go, maybe we're the issue and not the kids, right? Next question I have for you is, here it is right here. As an online safety software developer, where do you see your industry heading in the next few years? And the reason I ask that is because of what's going on with Apple and Google right now, right? Where they seem like they're starting to push you guys out a little bit because they saw the need and now they're taking it over. So where do you see your industry going? Like, is it going to go by the way of the dodo bird, or are there other things that you as an industry can do in this area?
Great question, and I'm going to actually go backwards first before we go forward.
Yeah.
Back to like Apple's approach on things.
Yeah.
I was very vocal about this with our first version of iOS because of what we were limited on. I actually emailed Tim Cook a few times.
Did he reply?
Supposedly his email is monitored. Of course not, right? But of course it's supposedly monitored. So I'm guessing a message got sent or got received. But I broke it down of, if I was Apple, here's what I would do. And pretty much my vision of what iOS could look like, or any smart device. It would start with, who's the user, right? And based on that, your onboarding of your phone takes you down a different path, just like our app does, right? So if you're a child, well, then you start with the age. And then based on the age, you have maybe some recommendation on age limits, or time limits. There may be app limits. And maybe it would automatically detect, here are apps we will not allow for your child, but here's some apps we will allow. So kind of that breakdown of coaching the parent, thinking that the parent's not very technical, right? Because they aren't in most cases.
Yeah.
It's a very minute amount of people that are truly deep into that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the part of my email, my first one. And then I got nothing when we launched our app. Then a few months later, with user feedback and all that, and our challenges we had with managing those, I sent another email. I said, here's user feedback. Here are 1-star reviews from parents. This is not because of our app can't do it. It's because we are not allowed to do it on your platform. We're limited. So it kept going. So I sent 3 emails. It's actually on the Medium post that I did a few years ago. Got a few hits on that. And then literally the year after is when the rumors started that iOS 12 was coming out with screen time. And then they start kicking us out. So to fast forward to what I see going next is, I've been saying this for about a year now, is these kind of like screen time features, app control features are pretty much becoming kind of a commodity like antivirus.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They've kind of gone down that path. As soon as you get the big boys jumping in and copying the innovators, those features are probably like game over. Yeah. You have to really be providing something unique on top of that, maybe like a multi-platform play or something like that, different, or a safe browser, or other things that add value to the core functionality.
Right.
And to me, the ultimate, if there was a vision that I could influence people with, is give parents an open API, like we presented actually to Apple.
What's an API for the people who don't know what an API is?
Yeah, good one. Techie stuff. So think of an API like a piece of language of instructions that we can talk to each other and understand each other.
There you go.
So when I say jump, you know how to say jump in like 15 different languages, right? Or what have you. So it's a piece of a connector, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
So I guess during that time, and part of the conversation is I spoke to a lot of competitors, CEO of other competitors. We're fighting against the same customer, right? But it's such a massive market, it's all good. So we created a website called screentimeapi.com. And that has pretty much, if a parent is looking to test and compare a bunch of parental control apps, just go to that website. You got them all to test. Pick
What's
five.
that site again? What's that site again?
Screen Time. It's screentimeapi.com.
Perfect. We'll make sure we put that into the notes, right?
Yeah. So that website came out of a few of our, not all the guys that are presented on there were part of that document.
Right.
I was part of that document because, as you know, I've been pushing that narrative of, this is crap that we're getting this kind of treatment when we're the leaders and we're not getting support or even some kind of promotion from these platforms. Yeah. Anyway, so we presented a technical document to Apple, how we would take care of privacy, user data, and security so that there's no issues. This was the year that Apple was, went to Vegas and had that big, iPhone is privacy, or what stays on your iPhone is in your iPhone, which is actually not true.
Yeah.
So good marketing spin, right?
Yeah.
But people will believe that at face value. So this group of people got together. I keep in touch with them now, but we're all in the same boat. And my vision is, to go back to that, is having any phone that parents can open up, to connect to their Wi-Fi, automatic detection of all the connected devices in their home. Could be the Xbox, the smart TV, the computer, what have you. Of course, a smartphone for the kids. Mm-hmm. And you have one pane of glass to control everything. Time allocation, app controls. That's, to me, is where we get ubiquitous kind of control and access for parents. And then it's just easy. It's like an easy button, right?
Yeah.
We're not there yet, because now you have Apple that wants that data and control within Apple. Apple has no interest in controlling Android devices or the Xbox or Microsoft Windows.
Yeah.
Now you got Microsoft doing that. They're only going to do Android because they're invested heavily in Android now with their own phone coming out.
Right.
So they're doing Xbox and Microsoft Windows, of course. And then you got Google that's doing stuff with Chromebooks and Android devices with their Family Link stuff. So I don't know if those three guys are going to get together, but you bring up a good point around the COVID tracing. I mean, maybe that is a sign of maybe they can collaborate and build a platform that even third parties could plug in.
You just got to wonder. You just got to wonder in that the news article that they put out to announce it, where Apple was first and Google was second, how much fighting was going on between those two to figure out whose name went first and whose name went second, right? But do you see any other innovations down the road for people like you? I'm actually surprised Apple didn't approach you guys and go, you know what, you got a really good product. How would you like to sell to us? Or how about you consult with us? Like, I'll be honest, I was quite surprised, because usually that's what they do, right? Is they find things that they want and then they acquire them. And same thing with Google.
The difference for me, that's a good question. And no, they did not approach us. Would have been nice. Yeah. But I think what happened with us versus, say, other technologies that they acquire is they don't necessarily start shutting those technologies down before they acquire them, or start making it hard for them to do business. See, with us, it was already difficult to do what we did with the approaches we were able to do on iOS, right? Without getting too technical. Just think of it. It was not as shiny as the Android offering.
Right.
Even if we wanted to do it on iOS, we could not do it in the same manner.
Right.
Limitations of the platform, right? So that was, I think, the main difference. If you're gonna, look at a 10,000-foot view of things, well, why did it not take a few of you guys and put you in a room and extract everything, and then just give you a check and say thank you very much, see you later? Yeah. Because I think, one, they didn't need to, because they have the experts and the engineering power to do whatever they want. Yeah. But I think I don't know if it's we as a general parental control group or one or two may have rubbed Apple the wrong way along the way. I mean, I know there's, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to do this today, but I know there is one competitor that did some fairly non-standard ways of installing certain things on an iOS device. And you probably know who I'm talking about. Yeah. And that was not standard. I mean, my team, we talked about doing it that way. And I'm like, no, I don't want to play that game. It's kind of a techie approach to do it.
Do you think that Android or Google or Android will ever prevent you from sidejacking your product onto their device?
I mean, iOS, I don't think allows installs from outside of the App Store anymore.
Unless they jailbreak the phone, right?
Yeah, I think you have to jailbreak with iOS.
Yeah.
Android, since I think Android 9 has been definitely more proactive in putting up warnings about unknown sources being, a security issue, which I think is good because I think it prevents things like, potential malware being installed or what have you.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you're installing it from like a known source, like our website as an example, it's a secure website. It's, there's no surprises here. We just have to educate the user that, when the pop-up happens, trust us, right?
Yeah.
But I do believe Android 11 is going to make it harder, the upcoming one, from what I've read. Getting definitely closer to what iOS 13 did with, location tracking is another thing that's not just affecting us, but other apps like fitness apps and all that stuff, having a hard time with that one.
I do think that government has to come in at some point in time because these big boys and girls are pushing the smaller. There's something just not right about that. But my next question to you is to you. Here we go. Many in our industry are very protective of their product and don't necessarily play well in the sandbox with their competition. Not just your industry, but my industry as well. And you're different in the fact that you led the charge in bringing your industry together specific to Apple. Why did you take this leadership role?
Big question.
It is.
I mean, I've always believed that a long time ago, keep your enemies closer than your friends, right? Or whatever they say. And I never really treated any of these guys as enemies. I think all of them were providing a fairly good product. A lot of the co-founders were all dads like me.
Yeah.
So when I found that I had at least those things in common outside of the business, I said, well, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
They're going to say you're crazy, right? I don't think so. I mean, I'm doing the same thing you are. Some of you guys are bigger than me. Some of you guys are smaller than me. But together we're stronger. We're all smaller than Apple. Right? Yeah. So to take that was a little bit of a leap of faith. It was not hard to find who's who, and I just said, listen, I tested all your products. You all do some good things, and you all have some areas that you're not as good, and we're all in the same boat. Yeah. But with Apple, I think they're treating us all the same. So originally, I wanted to make sure that we were not being singled out. And then when I had a few of the competitors reply back to me, go, no, we got the same letter, we got the same this, same guideline. I felt better, but then I'm like, ooh, okay, like this is going to be tough.
Yeah.
And then kept in touch with everybody. And then, I held back on communicating a lot around what we were doing internally. Like I didn't share outside that I'm talking to the CEO of this company or that company. But I think that was part of why there's also a lot of respect, I think, between companies is that we didn't go out until the Screen Time API website that I mentioned earlier.
And I think
it was fairly non-public.
I think if my memory serves me well, I think when Bark first came on the market, because I really liked their product, I think I connected you to because there were some concerns that Bark wasn't working so well on your platform, right? Yeah. And it's just really cool how you were able to remove yourself from your sandbox, as I like to call it, right? Or invite others in to play along. I mean, and as a result of that, you created that website that you just that you mentioned, where people can come in. I mean, that was a collective approach to it, correct?
Yeah, it was a teamwork. Like I said, there's probably 5 or 6 of the competitors on that page that we're having Slack calls every week and chatting on away about what we could do. And the reason there was pressure is this all started with a New York Times article, right, around Apple anti-competitive. You probably remember that 2 years ago. Yeah. And a few were quoted in there, and then I'm like, okay, well, we've been chatting. Good job, guys.
The other thing too is the small fry, right, compared to Apple. A lot of times, you guys are what keeps Apple and Google honest.
Yeah.
When you think about it, right? Like when you think about it that way, like that's what I think as well, right? Is that because if they have the monopoly, then we have to trust everything they're saying and doing, and past performance dictates future behavior with some of this stuff, right? So next question I have for you, which is right here, and the question is, what is the biggest challenge that you have identified when it comes to parents and keeping their kids safer in the on-life world. In the on-life world. Again, I like to call it the on-life rather than the
Yeah,
online
no,
or
it's
offline. So
a good term for it. It's
It
like,
is.
people used to call digital citizenship, which is really just citizenship now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's
Yeah.
the same thing. Just call it citizenship
Yeah, it's
anywhere.
on life, right? It's on life.
I would go back to what I said earlier is the conversations, right? Like talking about what you do online or offline or your on life or what's expected. I mean, as I mentioned, before you give that smartphone to your child, be aware of what's out there. Have a little bit of knowledge base of social media platforms, what's popular with kids, what's being shared. And a tip related to this in parallel is don't believe every headline. It's not all negative, as we've said. There's a lot of good out there, but negative headlines seem to get the taps or the most clicks, right? So that's usually what will pop up first. But there's definitely, I think, the biggest thing is just communicate and don't stop communicating about their on life world. I think is the key, because technology is going to move, it's going to evolve, it's going to get faster, it's going to get this and that. But the social connection with your kids, you have maybe an 18-year window before they graduate and move out. Take advantage of those 18 years.
Yeah, and the other issue here is let your kids teach you. Like a lot of what I share, I learned from Brandon was my digital Yoda. I was his digital Padawan, right? And I mean, it's just, that's what he was, right? But if there's one thing I've heard from teens right across Canada and the United States, because we've presented to just over 490,000 of them now, and here's what I hear the majority of them say to me. You know what, Darren? I try to teach my mom and dad about this stuff, but they have no patience. They have no patience. If there's anything I can share with parents is if you give your kids a little bit of patience, you'll be amazed at what you learn. Although you don't want to sit down and learn how to play Fortnite, do it. Because the bonding that will happen by doing that and what you will learn will pay huge dividends as a parent, but it takes time and effort to do that. And I get we parents are busy, right? I mean, you live in Vancouver, you need to work 4 jobs to afford a house living there, right? I mean, I live in Victoria, right? So I get it. I truly get it. But the fact remains that the good evidence-based peer-reviewed research is showing us that parents that engage with their kids in the online world, those kids are far less likely to find themselves in difficult situations online.
I agree. I mean, I engage with my son, occasional Call of Duty games, that kind of stuff, and I'm no good at them anymore. I think I used to be good at those things, but it's a conversation started at the dinner table, right? Like, hey,
absolutely. Dad, that's the other thing I say.
Right?
I say to parents, pick one night a week, I don't care what night, have a digital dinner with your kids. That doesn't mean they bring their phones to the table. Phones should never come to the table. But sit down and ask your kids, hey, I heard about this new thing called TikTok. What is it? How does it work? What's it do? And you'll be amazed at what your kids will talk about for 30 minutes. They would rather talk about TikTok than for 30 minutes than what you're going to do at grandma's house on the weekend. So give them that opportunity.
No, 100%. And you're right. I mean, I think part of it, there has been a benefit, kind of a sideline related to that question or that comment is, because we're stuck at home most of the time, I'm not running my son to his hockey practices and hockey games or my daughter's sports and activities after school, though she drives herself now, which is kind of nice. We have all this time to have time as a family at the dinner table. Like, I can't believe how nice that has been. I will miss it when it stops, but those conversations of things like that, like you said, the on life, what are they doing? What's happening with their friends online, or the moods changes in the day. It's like, well, what was it? What were you upset about earlier? Yeah. Well, this thing happened in the texting. Well, that should always be happening, and it's not, because we're all busy.
And that's one of the cool things about COVID is it's actually, I'm hearing this a lot from parents, is that they're actually bringing families closer together. The other thing, the cool thing I'm seeing, I've never seen as many kids outside riding bikes, writing chalk on pavement, walking with their parents than I see now, right? It's absolutely amazing. The other positive thing out of COVID right now is I think kids are learning that, maybe the digital world, the on-life world isn't all there is to be, right? Like they want to get...
Makes you question it, right? Makes you question it.
The kids have said to me, we're actually missing school. Yeah. What? Right? And you know what they're missing though? What they've said to me? They're missing the structure that school brings to their lives, right? Because now with COVID, there is no structure technically. And that's another key that I say to parents is that if you can build a little bit of structure into what's going on in your kids' lives right now, it can go a long way during COVID. So next question I have for you. You know what? I've listened to several of your Bench Banter podcasts, which I would recommend to all our viewers. And again, we'll share a link to that on the video we're doing. What is the impetus for the creation of these podcasts? What were the impetus for doing that? I love your musical intros, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we're talking about the music influence. So
Yeah.
keep finding some of those out there. I mean, number one is that I'll have to get you on there real soon, so we'll talk about that offline. I think you'd be a great guest on there. I'll go back to when I started the business. I had done a lot of research around the content marketing game, and I felt that content marketing for this space would be a killer resource that keeps on giving. So I definitely started with blogging and the social media stuff and all that. But once I got that up and running, I'm like, the podcast could be the next thing, man. It's kind of the last 2 years, they're getting more popular and there's more platforms, it's easier to do and produce.
Yeah.
So we actually started off with a video approach because the Bench Banter came out of an idea that I would go around Vancouver, our area here, because I can travel to it, sit down with a parent or an expert, and we just sit on the bench, a park bench somewhere, and record ourselves talking about various life tips, family online tips, whatever.
Bench banter, right? Yeah.
Bench banter, exactly. So kind of worked, and I'm like, it's kind of a sport-related thing as well, especially if you're European, UK-based. Banter is kind of a term there. But I'm French-Canadian, so it doesn't really come from my background per se. But it works from a sports fan and just parents sitting down chatting, and that's what I want. I want it to be kind of a comfortable two people sitting down chatting about various things. And I've had people from sexual exploitation conversations to gamers, to online safety experts like yourself, and everybody's got a different view on things, so it's nice. And as you mentioned earlier, you've interviewed people around the world, and I got a couple of people in the European area that I'm trying to get on board as well to get their view on things. So, and Australia is another hot spot for online safety. So, there's the impetus was I just thought it was the next evolution of the content. I'm kind of tired of blogging. I got a few guest bloggers now that keep the lights on a bit, but I was never really a writer, so for me it was not the most natural thing. I enjoy this better.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's really cool because, I mean, this is basically a video podcast, right? When you think about it, it's video based. We're doing the same thing, but it's just so cool that, in days gone by, we couldn't reach out like this like we do now because of technology, but now we can. And, just getting viewpoints from everybody. Like I'm hoping to do an interview from a cyber safety person from Dubai. Right, because I want because how they're teaching there is totally different than they do here for obvious reasons, right? So I want to get their insight into what's going on in this field, and I love bringing in other people. Like what we're talking about today is not just about safety and security; it's about owning a business and how you need to pivot and what you're pivoting, which kind of leads me to my next question because I got a lot of teens who approach me getting ready to move on and thinking about careers. And here's the question. For teens and young adults who are watching as a security software developer, what kind of training, education, and certification would you recommend if they were interested in getting involved in your industry to help open the door? Because one of the things I share with kids right now is that those kids who can graduate from high school and code Python, HTML, JavaScript, C++, boy, oh boy, they're setting themselves up. I mean, what was it? Last year, I read a report, there were 182,000 openings for coders in our country, and they couldn't fill all the positions. So they had to hire people from other countries. So as an expert in the field, that's you, involved in what kind of education or training should these young adults be looking at?
For the next level is kids should probably start considering a LinkedIn profile fairly early. To start preparing for networking, right? As an example, finding other people out there, because this is more of a professional network than, say, like social network. And then they can find what other developers are, certified in to be an Android developer or to be a back-end services developer or just a web developer. And people are fairly open to help people when you ask for help. That's what I've noticed in this industry. Right.
Yeah, one of the things I want to share with you is the interview I conducted earlier today was with Mike Russell, and he is the director of communications now with the Cowichan Valley School District. And he was a police officer. He ran our social media in Victoria Police, and then he went into the corporate world. And he's now a director, right? And he has no major degree in communications or anything. Like, do you have post-secondary? Like, do you have college, university?
I did. So a funny story is, my music hobby got me to get pretty technical with computers. So
but here's where I'm going with this. This is important, but continue. Continue.
Yep. So my only kind of post-secondary was I took a Microsoft Certified Engineer course. So I took about a year long where I could be a network administrator. And I found it boring. I'm like, this is boring. I'm sitting in front of a computer playing with widgets and dragging stuff and security. It wasn't for me. So I ended up getting into sales, selling software. So and it never looked back, right? And became a VP of sales of that company at 10 years later. So yeah, I don't think you necessarily need something like that. You can do it quite at self-paced.
Yeah, and this is my point. My point is, when I'm now talking to some very successful people in this industry, and a lot of them are saying to me, you know what, Darren, I got maybe 1 year or 2 years of post-secondary, I have no major, but yet they're CEO of companies or they own companies like you. And the reason they got successful was because they followed their passion. Yeah. Right? And it seems like that's what happened to you, right? You were a salesperson, but then as a father, your passion became trying to figure out how to design something like Boomerang. And as a result, you became successful as a result of doing that. So that's my other message. Because, the other thing I think coming out of COVID, I'll share this. I think it's going to change education.
I agree.
I think that young people are going to come out of COVID going, well, why do I want to start a job at $86,000 in debt? And yet I'm not guaranteed a job. And even if I do, I may lose it during the next pandemic, right? So,
exactly.
So, I'm not saying that education isn't important. I mean, Brandon, he's got his master's, he's thinking about getting his PhD, right? As well. It is important in certain places, but for a lot of the young people who are watching, I also think that if you look at something that you're passionate about and you can be quite successful, and you're a good example of that.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think education is going to come out of this in a better spot, but also with some great new opportunities to teach kids. I mean, kids are learning differently than even I did, right? I mean,
well, in fact, the person who I interviewed earlier today, who's the director at Cowichan Valley Schools, he was saying that there are some students who are actually excelling right now because of it. Because the classroom didn't really fit them well, but doing things that they're doing at Line on Home is working really well, and they're excelling at it. So again, one of the things I find with education is very cookie cutter approach, right? Yeah. And so,
very strict.
Kids learn differently, and these are some of the things that I think will come out of COVID. But let's have a look at the next question here. What has been the biggest challenge that you have faced as a security software developer, and how has this made you grow both personally and professionally? You're welcome.
Well, what a question. We've touched on it a bit. I mean, on the biggest challenge, I think, for us will continue to be fighting the big boys, the big platforms, and as they kind of rip parts of features and build them in. I mean, I think that's going to be the ongoing challenge. And part of that challenge for us will be how do we pivot to stay competitive and still offer a solution that adds value. And I think the safe browsing pillar for me continues to be, I think, the unique angle, because I don't see Apple and or Google going into the nuances of websites that we block and filter, especially for the purposes of what we're blocking, right? And one thing we did not actually touch on, we've been talking a lot about the kids around the safe browsing, but for the almost, we're approaching 1 million downloads of our on a Google Play listing for the safe browser Spin.
And the majority.
Or lifetime downloads, yeah.
Congratulations!
So
that's cool.
It's pretty cool when it's like no marketing, just organic. Last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, some do it faster, but we put no marketing effort into this. It was primarily built, as I said, for the kids and maybe like a loss leader for marketing the app, right?
Yeah.
So, but a lot of those downloads are actually not from kids or parents looking for their kids. They're actually adults that have or identified that they have a pornography addiction to online content. Yep. And our browser is a great alternative to just, lock it down. They get an urge, we block it. And our filter is, like any filter, nothing's perfect, but a lot of our users today have tested all the key ones out there, and they always come back to ours because we have that nuance filter. And what we stand for is, pornography, nudity, prone to bad content, even unsafe search engines that we cannot enforce safe search in them. We block all that automatically. There's no arguments, there's no ands or buts. So,
do you think, automatic. I didn't look this deep, but does your app allow, if students are typing a message, does it use any form of AI to identify that what they're writing may be problematic, and therefore before they hit that send button, they should think twice before doing it?
We're not doing that today. All we do is a keyword detection once it's sent or received. So we're not doing any like proactive, hey, dear kid, are you okay? Are you mad? Or we detected this. Definitely the next evolution. There are a couple players starting to do that now. They're teaching the machine, but we are not going there yet. We're having some chats with some folks about it, but
I do think, as a person who does what I do looking in, that would be especially because, that prefrontal cortex of the kids, especially the young ones, ain't working so well. And so as a result of that, if it was built into the keyboard that it could recognize that. And now the secret is how does it also recognize things like emojis, right? Because kids are getting smart at all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think that is another shtick that could be in the future, right?
Well, I think in terms of what does the future look like or the next 5 years, I think, AI and machine learning are definitely going to help, industries like ours to pivot and look forward, because at the end of the day, the content is not going to stop being created, right?
Right.
So we got to find a way to, and I think if it gets smarter, as I said earlier, if the devices are smarter at onboarding their users on who they are, like a child or an adult, and then they can also coach the child or the adult on their communication out before it's out. Even think as an adult, you're upset right now, you want to send a nasty text to somebody.
Yeah. Or a hockey
player. It says, "Whoa, hey, JP," or yeah, exactly, right.
Or a singer. I think
Yeah.
one of our Canadian singers found out that "cut like a knife" actually means more than what he thought when he first created the song.
Yeah,
right.
Cuts like a knife, all right. Maybe the best time was summer '69, right? So stuck to that one. I know it's a tough one. So, to go back to your question about personally, I think it's maybe as as an entrepreneur, it's maybe a better person, better dad, because I'm around the household all the time. Like this is it was a challenge to jump into this game as a challenge because you're starting from zero, the unknown, right? But then, the last 5+ years, being able to be around the kids, be around the milestones, the activities, build your own schedule, been awesome. Professionally, I think I've built a pretty good network, which I was not doing when I was a VP of sales and comfortable in a job that's paying really well. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the two angles I've had when you consider all the challenges we've had, or the biggest ones I share, which is I think is going to be the big guys continuing to remove features, integrate them, and make them pretty much redundant from a standpoint of they're just like an antivirus checkbox, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's those are the challenges. But personally, professionally, keep growing, man. If you're not learning every day, it's not good, right?
Which kind of segues into my last question here, which is, has the COVID pandemic had an effect on your company? And what are your thoughts on how this pandemic is going to change business models around the world? Not just within your industry, but other industries as well.
It's a great question, great one to wrap up with. The first part is for us, it's had minimal impact in terms of our user base and new user acquisitions. If anything, it's been an opportunity because people are looking more for controls and time limit apps, which we are. So that standpoint, it's been good. But the one challenge we've had is the app review times are taken up to a week now. So whereas it used to take maybe a day or two, like Google's app review can take up to 7 to 8 days. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
You figure a company with that kind of horsepower could automate that a little bit better, but it is what it is. Funny enough, Apple takes 1 to 2 days. I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, it took us because as you know, we have a free app that we put out there that has all these mental wellness. It took us, I think it was 2 weeks for Google, and then I think it took about a week for Apple, if I'm not mistaken.
So it depends if you're there before or not and how much changes you've done to your app. But Google has been consistently 5 to 6 days in the last 2 months. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's unacceptable by now. Yeah. The first month I could accept it based on the fact that, okay, it's a big hit to all the companies and organizations out there, but you got to be able to adapt faster than that, a company that size. And in terms of my thoughts going forward, we talked about education. I consider education kind of a business model as well, both pre and post-secondary. I think you're going to see potentially more flexibility in a curriculum where you can do stuff online, self-paced at home. The tools are going to get better to track and monitor and set goals and all that. I see that with my kids. So my kids actually go to two different high schools. Mm-hmm. My daughter goes to a different high school than my son. So my daughter's is more structured, and my son's is more self-paced curriculum approach, which is great when you're doing like high-level hockey with a schedule that's kind of needs flexibility, right?
Yeah.
So for him, it's been great at home because there's less distractions.
Right.
So he's actually excelled with the home structure, thanks primarily to my wife who's been on him a lot. But now he's got a bit of a routine now. So that's been good. And then for businesses, I think some are going to suffer a lot. But you look at like restaurants, right? Like where some of them have adapted to doing takeout more. I think they're going to have some reinvention there. And then, even sports. I think sports is going to be a big one that we have to monitor over the summer. I mean, my son plays high-level hockey. There's been no hockey. There's some slow reopenings of some rinks and some small group training camps coming up soon, it sounds like. But, I think physical sports like hockey, rugby, football, that's going to be interesting because, until there's a vaccine for this thing, I think it's going to be the state of limbo, unfortunately. And that's a tough because I think there's going to be this, in 5 years from now, we're going to go, wow, we went a little too extreme. But then what could have been the alternative if we did not go too extreme? So that's tough. And I feel for the kids because
I actually think that we're probably into this. I don't think school's going to return to normal this fall, right? I just don't. I think we're going to have a hybrid approach to it. I think it won't be until the spring until we have those vaccines. But I was interviewing another business owner who said, you know what, Darren, I spend $1.5 million on leasing a brick and mortar building to bring employees in to sit in behind a cubicle to type stuff behind a computer. And you know what? I'm finding that they're doing better at home than they ever did at the office. So why should I pay $1.2 or $2 million in a lease when I can have these people do it at home, do it just as effective, if not more, and then take that money and dump it back into my branding or into my pocket or pay my employees a little bit more. Like it's like I think that's something else that's going to come out of this. Like I do agree with you. I think we're going to see the number of bankruptcies in small businesses drop dramatically. Like we're lucky that we're home based, much like we can work out of the home and do what we do.
It's a good test.
Right?
You want to test your business.
But holy cow, like I do think that it's going to have definitely an interesting effect, especially for businesses now who are going, it's working from home isn't so bad, right? So.
And you probably saw this too. I mean, the original thing was this whole issue of trust, right? I mean, the employer not trusting employees. And these were typically companies that were still old school mentality that had not embraced technology like I have for a long time.
Yeah.
And even like government and stuff like that will have to consider improvements there. Maybe they won't need all the real estate. Then the question is, what do you do with that real estate? Well, it could be converted to residential or what have you. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting, man. I don't know. I mean, that's a good point around
even some businesses. I'm sure you've heard this. The employers were so concerned about employees doing work at home that in order to work at home, you had to put in spyware that the employers are watching to make sure. Like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, here's my comment. If I'm going to let somebody work from home, here are your goals and objectives. Here's where it needs to be done by. If it's not done by that time, I don't care what you do in between, but as long as it's done, this is what I'm paying you for. Great. If not, then we'll have a discussion, right? Like, holy cow.
Results based, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in sales, results are results. Pretty simple to manage, right? I don't care if you had to do 10 calls, 100 calls to get that. Hit your quota. Yeah. Hit the quota.
Yeah, for
simple.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting times.
Last question I have for you, which is the one that I end all my sessions with, is your final thoughts specific to social media safety and digital literacy while we navigate this ever-changing world event that we got going on right now. So what are some of your thoughts on that for final closing?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the hockey player, Brandon Lipsick, there with, so-called private communications in a group chat saying some nasty things that, probably a lot of us do when we're young or whatever. It doesn't have to be necessarily about women, but just nasty language, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's probably for me, my current state of mind right now is thinking about, our actual day-to-day communications. How private are they when they're online? Yeah, especially in group chats and all that.
Here's what I say to everybody. I don't care what platform you're on. I don't care what security. I don't care what app you're using. Everything we do online is public. It's permanent. It's searchable, exploitable, copyable, shareable, and a lot of times it's all for sale. And never forget that. Never forget that rule. Because your friend today could be your frenemy tomorrow, right?
100%.
And so things can come back to haunt you. So I'm just going to go into my closing here. But if you want to hang around, because I'd like to debrief after this. But in closing, I just want to thank Justin for accepting my invite to talk today. It's really, really, really cool for us to talk to leaders, thought provokers, change makers in the industry, such as Justin, to get their thoughts, not just on from a safety and security standpoint, but also from, he brought parenting into the issue. He brought leadership into the issue. There's a variety of different things that he brought in to share with the group, and I really want to thank him for that. So thank you for everybody for tuning in to today's Thinkable Thursday. We look forward to our next session. So on behalf of myself, I'm Darren. Brandon's in the control booth right now, and the rest of the White Hatter team. Thank you for tuning in to Thinkable Thursday, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.